Kid of Arcadia. Chapter 14. Sparks in a Hot Room. Josh's blood had dried to the floor by the time the woman unlocked the door. I noticed the hardened red drops as I made my way down the ladder from the bunk and stepped around them as I dressed. While he slept, I found escape from the muggy air that Sunday morning in a cold shower, and then returned to the room and sat still dripping by the window to enjoy the breeze. It seemed Josh would have some cleaning to do when he woke. I dug through the bottom desk drawer and pulled out the notebook where I had scribbled my dream journal wanderings for all those years and wondered why I was bringing it into my therapist that day. My wet fingers stained the blue lines on the wrinkled pages and some of the graphite chicken scratch rubbed off. I can still see these smudges to this day. Every time I looked at it, I always found more entries than I remembered, but the ones I penciled in around the time I met Eliot were too painful to even look at. Some things never change, I guess. I remember feeling like I was entrusting something very personal about myself to this lady by letting her see my journal. So I walked into the avalanche of that day's session with it propped under my arm and was immediately taken aback by the sight of this old guy bent over the seat beside the therapist. She introduced me to this face of thick-rimmed glasses and sideburns and said that this time I'd be talking to this specialist guy and taking some evaluations. I hid the notebook behind my back and stuffed it under me when I sat down, this time twice as pinned against the wall by another pair of leering eyes. She saw me do it, though, and soon had the specialist swishing through them, both expecting it to be an open and shut case if my deepest, darkest secrets be revealed in writing, I guess. My cheeks ran red. I knew resisting their attempts to have a look after I had brought the notebook in would only make them more suspicious than they actually were, so I half-heartedly nodded and let the man partake as he pleased. It was the first and last time I had ever willingly given up my private writings for many years. But what else could I do? She never told me she was getting some lackey to look them over the day before when she suggested I bring them in, but nothing of mine was as sacred to me since I'd been removed from my home, so I didn't care all that much. I could take betrayal. I'd taken worse. "This is really interesting that you do this, and for so long. You find this helps you sleep?" the man asked. "Jared used to suffer from sleep paralysis and night terrors when he was little," she chimed in, explaining all that I had told her with bigger words. He began monitoring his dreams to diffuse fears he had about being unable to move once he woke up. He said this seemed to help his fears. "That's abnormal, but not unusual," the specialist muttered, as if disappointed. "But the best I could say is that it may be another symptom of whatever stressor is causing his conduct behaviors, because it's my understanding that he's been having some other trouble, or concerns were that he's been acting out inappropriately. Either way, this is not why I'm here. Now, you said he's got no formal charges against him, right?" "No, this is just for the social worker concerning statements made by his brother during her investigations of the parents. He's a rather impulsive young man, though, first with his mild aggression, especially that directed toward his brother, which he has admitted to and regrets, and then with his truancy and his admitted suicidal thoughts. And of course you're aware now that he has also admitted to being sexually molested in the past at least once, right, Jared?" the therapist explained. "And it's that last part I'm the most interested in now, but we'll get to each in its time," the man said. I just rolled my eyes. He slouched back in the chair like he was reading a bedtime story with one hand holding the pages and the other fisted in front of his mouth. The therapist lady cleared some of the day's air with me, but it was too hard to concentrate. When he whispered something in her direction, she spun around, thumbed through a filing cabinet, and pulled out some forms. "Well, thanks for letting me look at that," he said, flippantly tossing my dream journal on the desk like it was nothing. "So what's this I'm hearing from your caseworker about this misconduct stuff? You tell me. Be honest, be brave, be a man. What's going on with Jared these days?" I said nothing, and every second I stalled made it easier to let the question go, but he was bent over, elbows on his knees, determined to find out in one way or another if I was as ruined as he had been led to believe. He squinted his eyes and ducked his head, trying not to look as nervous around me as he was. "Come on, son. You had admitted something rather shocking a week or so ago, and we got your brother saying you were pushing him around and making him say things, and you've been depressed lately. Can I tell the court that's a pattern?" I said nothing. It was too embarrassing to talk about. "I'm going to ask you right out then." He shook as he tilted his head back to me. "In your opinion only, answer the following question with often, sometimes, rarely, or never. You get that? Here it goes. I want to be able to do sexual or violent things around boys or girls younger than myself." The question startled me right out of the water. This woman there had led me around with all this honesty stuff, and now I had this old guy breathing down my neck trying to figure out why I was so messed up when even the word sexual was making him blush. One look told me this guy hated himself for every fantasy he ever had, like he was touched in the head or something. Why else would a grown man be that interested in my sexual thoughts, and even call himself a specialist on them? It was embarrassing. I didn't want to think about it. Sometimes, I said, and then realized the only answer that took all suspicion off was never. That's okay. That's being honest. Here we go. This is just like baseball. You answered honestly, you got to first base. You have to be honest with me if you want to go home. You want to go home, so here's question 2. Sometimes I feel sad or angry around boys or girls younger than myself. Agree, disagree, unsure. He obviously had no idea how baseball works. I shrugged my shoulders and gulped. Agree. He shifted position in his seat. You wanted to play it this way. I'll stop asking these questions if you're willing to talk. Here we go. Expressing my sexual or violent feelings around kids younger than myself is inappropriate. Agree, disagree, unsure. Agree, I choked out. My cheeks burned and I shook in sickness, feeling that electric touch all over again. Okay, do you think the answers you gave me help me understand you a bit better? Or did they give me a wrong impression, Jared? Answer that for me. Look, man, okay? I'm not like that, okay? I didn't hurt him. It was just playing around. It's not my fault. I'm sorry, okay? I was struggling to hold back tears. I'm sure you are, and that's fine. But let me put it to you this way, because we really do want this to make sense for you. See, we think you're stuck in a victim-to-abuser cycle, Jared, and you can't just wish yourself out of it, nor is being sorry good enough. There's no easy way out, and you can't just run from it. Listen to yourself. Right now, you're telling me that you agree that what happened to you was awful, but what you were doing was okay because it wasn't as bad, or because you just knock it off. Come on, it would have gotten worse, because, Jared, that's how it starts. Do you see why we need to fix you? I gasped. A tear fell down my cheek. Kid, just put yourself in my chair for a second, and ask yourself what I or what anyone else might see as a problem with what you've been telling us, he said, leaning in close enough that I could make out my reflections on his glasses. I shrugged my shoulders and shivered, staring at the floor. Jared, come on. I know how big brothers are. I had one. Are you going to tell me that you wouldn't have gone on doing it, and worse? I just read what you wrote in your journal there, and one sentence jumped out at me. You wrote, I could have done his girl parts. Do you even remember writing that? Nobody told me that. What do you think it tells me? I hadn't even remembered writing that until then, and didn't even think anything of it back when I first half-drowsily penciled it in as a joke the year before, but now it meant something to these people. My cheeks filled with blood and scorched as I turned my head out of the line of fire for a second. I shrugged my shoulders again, and the office fell silent to the point I could hear the ventilation humming. He leaned back in his chair near to the therapist and raised his hand to cover his mouth so he could whisper something to her. She began writing more things down in my record. This is it, I thought. This is where I go down. My throat stung and I gasped, holding back tears. This has been good. He is not beyond our help, he said, and explained what was going to happen to me next. He handed me a short stack of printout questionnaires and a pen, and then had me seated at a metal school desk down the office suite's hall in a small closet with nothing more than a TV and a VCR hooked up in the corner on a cart. She told me to open the door when I was finished answering the questions and quickly left me alone there. I could barely breathe in the box, the only air sucked in through the door seams. The exam didn't mess around like these people did, and I knew exactly what it was looking for. The top of the crooked photocopy read feedback form for boys, and the next several pages asked a variety of questions like the ones he had thrown me, only so much more specific. Sometimes there was no way to tell which answer would have gotten me more in trouble, and I wasn't sure it made a difference anymore anyways. They already had me pegged as some monster or creep, and I was kicking myself for giving them the pleasure, whether it was true or not. Questions that asked how much I agreed with them, like masturbating relieves a lot of stress, assumed a lot about my sexual habits. The question figured I knew what masturbation was and that I did it often. No adult was ever this blunt. I guess they had papers do it for them when they got too nervous. A few seemed like repeats and others asked me to write in. All of them tested for my impulsivity in the various situations posed, my respect for authority, and my empathy for others. They forced me to think of my actual friends back at the Laps and all the unhinged activities we were swept up in back then that once seemed so normal. The scenarios were nothing but childhood chewed up and hurled back in these cartoonish bite-sized chunks. They were the past coming up to haunt me, a barrage of imagery that left me begging for some of my real life again. I opened the door when I finished. The therapist took my papers and instructed me to sit back down, then told me I'd be watching a few shorts and answering questions about each one on a special form. With all the talk of sex they just subjected me to, I thought she meant I'd be watching shorts, as in those things you wear around your waist, but she ran a tape through the VCR and stepped out of the room. The first one featured a 70s-styled girl getting groped by a boy on some crude brick wall set, and then asked me to rate how much I thought it affected her and how much he enjoyed it. They continued on like that, with one thing remaining constant in each: kids doing cruel and sadistic things to one another, often replaying the same lines except with the roles reversed. It always asked me to rate how I thought the victims were affected and how satisfied I thought their bullies felt, and other stupid shit. And the more I saw of it, the more it started to click, whether I wanted it to or not, that I was one of them, a disgusting monster. The pattern was clear and unavoidable. I was a chicken hawk. I could see the same devils I knew so well sitting behind the tormentor's eyes no matter who played the part. Seeing became touching, and touching became harmful. It was as simple as that. It wasn't just a weird confusion I had when I was around him. There was no more denying it. I really was just another creep, and it was either the victims or me, and the decision about who was more important was already made. After 20 minutes the tape ran out, and I handed in my evaluations. She gave me back my dream journal, and I clutched it tight to my chest. When I reached the waiting room, I didn't even bother checking out. I passed on through, pushed a few magazines off the end table in disgust, and stomped down the hall without a word, slamming the doors. I wasn't going to let the caseworker feel vindicated for crushing me just yet. She'd have to chase me first. I sprinted to the stairwell at the end of the hall, pushed out the lobby door, and bounded across the parking lot to the other side, where I hopped on the curb, tickled with excitement. She did catch up to me, though. I spent a minute swinging around the light poles out there, and then climbed into the boiling backseat of the car when I saw her. I didn't care. The sky turned deep blue overhead, streetlights blinked on down the streets, and the lot lit up like the surface of the moon. When she caught up, she stood outside the window and crossed her arms as if proud of herself. Now she'd get to go have her moment of glory in court for sure with those test results. She'd finally get to prove that she was right about me all along. She'd probably try to bring a misconduct case against me, make me do some real time, or find a way to fix me in the process. She'd be getting an amazing raise out of me, maybe even a vacation. I gave her the satisfaction that afternoon for her victory, knowing that she wasn't going to win. Still, that day in the office is why the sad last entry of my dream journal at the time reads like this. May 12, 1982. They think I'm like one of those creeps, but that's okay because they think they know everything when they don't. They don't know anything about me. I'm worse than a sicko to them. I don't care though, fuck it. I'm done writing in this. I'm a monster. In a dream, Dad was changing the oil on his car out in the snow, and he recruited me to go help him. I remember how he wanted to get the chore over with as fast as possible, but that was always when we'd talk. He needed me there for no other reason. His precious hatchback was sitting up on jacks in the driveway as he stood peering beneath its open hood with a wrench. I was shivering, shifting weight on my heels at the ready beside it, hands in pits. The oil took no time cooling that day. The December wind was whipping up an icy spray from the tops of the driveway banks and filling in Eliot's footprints from the day before. There was no getting out of this. Put it under the drainage bolt, he instructed. I grabbed the pan off the edge of the hood and crouched down on all fours to slide it under the vehicle. Then he slid under the jack car after it with the wrench, and I bent over to see below the body, resting my hands on my shaking knees. Loosen the cap, it's in the hood, he said from the ground. I reached over and twisted it as far as I could, my breath blowing a trail in the wind. By that time the snow could have buried the neighborhood beyond recognition or memory, lost in the white sky and the black tree line. Got it, I said. Good. He rolled from under and sprang to his feet. Now we just let that drain. Can I go? My fingers had only a trace of feeling left. A gust of frosted air hit me. No, I still need you here, he said, opening the filter box. There's this thing I need to ask you, and I don't mean to freak you out or anything, but it's important. Then he was back down on hands and knees with the new filter and tucked under the car where I couldn't see him. "Can you hand me the rag?" he asked. "Was that it?" I laughed as I grabbed the sticky cloth off the roof and slipped it to him underneath. Metallic grinds and clinks sounded for a few seconds, and then before I knew it, he was out and back on his feet again. Then he got serious. "The other night I had the same feeling I had when I decided to take you and your mom back into my life. I don't know what it means, but I just feel like everything's going to be all right somehow no matter what happens." "Okay," I said. "I got a feeling like everything's happening for a reason, and I think I know what it is." The wind heaped a few more feet of snow our way, building almost to the point where the tire tracks in the street slush no longer stood apart from the smooth white plain of the yard. The winter evenings swept in blue overhead and spewed sparkles over the icy top layer of snow as the porch lights shot on. Clumps of it on the tree branches broke off and rained on the street all around us as if trying to bury the memory. "It's in God's hands," he said. At the time I thought he was just making a joke about the car, so I started back toward the house. But then he forcefully grabbed me by the arm and tugged me back in close, only to turn around and wipe his wrench with the rag and place it on the roof. He wanted me there, but he didn't want to face me. "Jared, I know what you do to Eliot. He tells me everything, okay? I know it all. I know you didn't cause the bruises, but I know what you do to him in the bedroom, okay? I could punish you, but I'm not going to. I'm going to give you another chance, so you listen to me before something bad happens because of this. I'll keep quiet about it because the last thing I want is your mom finding out. But I tell you this for your own good because I don't care what happens to me, bud." "Dad, Just listen before you go shooting your mouth off. This is important, and I don't know how much time we got left," he said, with a sigh, obviously collecting his thoughts. "I took you and your mom back because I just wanted to give you a good place, like the kind I had growing up. It's all I wanted for you. It's why I busted my ass to get my shit together. I did it all for my boys, for you guys. When I was being saved, I was put through hell and dragged out the other side. But then nothing could make me go back. I want you to remember that. When God's got you, you're put in a hard place and given a choice between doing what you want or being a man and doing what you have to do. Now, I guess you got to make that choice too." "Okay," I said. It was all I could say about it. "Good. Now, I know you were going to say sorry, and I stopped you because I know you're probably not sorry yet. You're sorry I caught you. Just know for now that what you're doing isn't good. You're breaking my heart, Jared. You got to cut it out. He's not yours to punish, okay? Punish me. I can take it. You guys are brothers." "Half-brothers," I protested. He slammed the hood shut and cleared his throat. "Okay, bud, you're done here." His eyes saw straight into my thoughts. He was looking at them like they were moles or rashes on my skin, constantly deciphering their significance and trying to locate what caused the disease. That was the first time anyone had given me that curious stare, and it certainly wasn't the last. It told me more about his own suspicions than anything, about his own confusion over what he saw more than what he was seeing. He studied me closely as I crunched through the snow back toward the house. Before I made it, my eyes shot open, and the world was black. I was back in bed, and this time alone. It had to be past midnight by then, and already the dreams were so vivid they were keeping me from sleep. The meds weren't making things better, setting off the merry-go-round in my head to go bouncing and stomping all over the pillow as the bed rocked so hard my joints were locking up and I was vomiting air. When I couldn't take any more of that, I lifted out of bed and climbed to the floor to feel my way around in the darkness for the bathroom. With my head seeming 3 times its normal size, I could have tripped with the slightest nudge. Light and shadows corkscrewed the hallway walls from the lit bulb in the foyer at the bottom of the stairs. It was always kept lit at night so we could see where we were going. That night the woman had once again placed us in the supervision of her 20-year-old son, who did little more than crash on the living room couch when she was out, never keeping watch. As I neared the stairwell, I heard a strange voice squeal up from down there, so I edged to the corner and peered around it to where I could see the floor of the foyer downstairs. Blondie, or Gus rather, was sitting against the wall down there with a phone cord running along the floor around the corner. It was not the first time I'd seen the phone being used by someone without permission. It happened all the time, but I'd never seen anyone crying over it before. He didn't seem to care who heard him. Wherever that woman's son was, he wasn't downstairs doing his mom's job. Gus wiped his nose with his free arm, peered out around the threshold on the lookout, and then ducked behind the wall where I couldn't see him.
"Why?"
he asked, whispering almost inaudibly over the phone.
I hate this. What do I do? They can't just keep me here. I hate it. I hate it here. A year? Mom, I can't be here a year. Please just come get me. Why not? Why? What can I do?
Suddenly the door to the foyer burst open. The woman had returned home. She stood in the doorway and puffed one last breath on her cigarette outside as I could hear the kid thumping around somewhere below. He was obviously crawling out from behind the threshold, and when she heard this, she rushed into the opposite room and out of my view.
What are you doing?
She asked.
No, you stay put.
Her footsteps down there circled the threshold where she picked up the phone and went to war with his mother, who was apparently still on the line. I hid around the corner.
Who is this?
I'm sorry. No, you're not allowed to speak to him. I'm sorry. I'm ending this. Good night, ma'am. No, I'm hanging up. With one click she ended it, and her footsteps pounded over toward wherever he was.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
His voice croaked. You want this again? She asked. There was no telling what she was threatening him with. I couldn't believe it.
No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry,
he begged. Then go back to bed, and I can make it like it never happened. Go back to bed, Gus, she said. Knowing he was coming, I dodged for the bathroom and jiggled the doorknob, but for some reason it was locked. There was no light along the floor at the bottom, which meant someone had locked themselves in there in the dark again. It was strange, but sometimes the happenings in that house at night were otherworldly like that. Gus hit the stairs sobbing to himself and ran past me at the top. He ducked quickly into his bedroom across from mine and slammed the door. Then something shuffled and bumped around as the light flipped on in the bathroom. Shining out the bottom gap of the door, it lit the floor below my feet all the way to the opposite wall. The door unlocked, and I stepped back into the dark side of the hall where I could hide around the corner in the doorway to my room. When the bathroom door opened, it poured out a torrent of light that hit my eyes like a fistful of sand. The woman's son stepped out of it wearing a ski mask, followed by that teen girl nearly naked and frantically pulling her underwear back up her legs. She snuck across the hall into her room, and he threw the rest of her nightclothes in with her. When he turned the bathroom light off, and I could see again, he appeared as a tall silhouette against the light at the end of the hallway. He slipped his ski mask off and tucked it in his shirt, and it looked like he was zipping up for a moment as he checked around to see if anyone was watching before lurking all hotshot-like toward the stairs. I froze against the door in my room. His eyes hadn't adjusted to the dark yet either, because he stared in my direction for a second before continuing on down to where an argument erupted between him and his mother at the bottom. My mouth hung open. I couldn't believe my friggin' eyes. He knew just when Mommy was coming home, I thought, and I wondered if Gus always got to use the phone when that woman left her creep son in charge of us. After all I'd seen out there, my bed didn't seem like such a bad place, and in no time I was back lying flat in it as the lightning bolts on the ceiling washed my light-starved eyes out with all sorts of random colors and shapes a few feet over my face. The silence and spoken words downstairs roared in my ears with every electrical synapse firing in my brain, some in tune with the fireworks in my eyes. In a matter of seconds my lids grew heavy again and I was in another dream world. It was one I'd been to many times before, looking like the pine groves that were the lines. The sun was setting on us there, only a dot of light on the horizon dripping down between three great billows of smoke glowing bright orange, as if the hillsides were ablaze from the orange light outside the window. And they certainly were that afternoon, because I had started it. I found myself lying on the embankment with Eliot, feeling the earth rumble that special tremor that used to set every nerve on end as the cars rolled past on the road above. I made out Kelly standing in the corner of my eye along the path in the underbrush. She gave me the look with her large eyes and playfully strolled farther into the brush off the side of the road. So I trailed her like a dog a ways, and when I caught up with her on the forest path, we spent so many hours lying back in the high grass that I lost sight of my brother. She joined me in the search until we found him, but by then it was the late evening, and I'd never seen him so down and mute. He was sitting lonely at our brother spot on the rocks at the lines. He was drawing sharp-toothed and snake-eyed demons in the mud. And when I woke up, I still felt like I was dreaming. The bedroom was a muggy hell that next night with the summer evening just setting in outside and the window going black. That was when I made the decision that ended up costing me years and years of my life. That was the night I ended up regretting 1,000 times over. Josh made sure the door was shut and that no one was around before he spoke.
"Don't tell anyone this,"
he began, whispering over the sound of a million crickets outside cranked to full. "What?" I asked. He leaned in close. "My uncle's driving down tomorrow. Gus and I are going with him, because we've both had it with this friggin' place, and this time I'm not coming back." My heart leapt. "How'd you pull that?" "Remember the payphone? I finally got in touch with my uncle yesterday. I told him where I was at, and he said he could come down tomorrow night at such and such time. He's done it a few times. It's the summer break. He likes sneaking kids out of these joints, and we'll go shack with him. Only this time I'm never coming back. I got a plan this time." "You're running away again?" I asked. "Shh," he forced. He gestured for me to move in, and I drew so close I could smell the stink off his breath. "Yes, but not if you go tell the whole damn world about it. I'm telling you because I know you can keep secrets." He smirked and lifted the underside of his arm to reveal the deep and purpled scrape he'd given it the week before. "Yeah, don't worry about it," I assured him. "Tomorrow night." I knew he'd been up to something. Ever since that spark over dinner, he'd not been himself, but I hadn't really been paying attention to him in that time to really catch on with his vibe. This was something different, though, the most exciting news I'd heard in weeks, and I just had to ask him if he still had room. Why else would he be telling me about it? "Just you and Gus?" I asked. "Are you coming or not?" "Hell yeah," I shouted, and he hit me in the shoulder. "Shh," he forced again, his voice then a strained whisper. "Okay, but nobody else, got it? Don't say anything to anybody because that girl can't be trusted. She'd turn me in out of spite if she found out. I can't stand that bitch. Josh, I just want to get out of here. I don't care where we're going. I don't even care if we go to the hall for it. Just anywhere but here is good," I said, and held out my hand. We shook on it eye to eye, turned the lights out, and whispered back and forth almost all night, outlining the plan for escape and how it was going down. "And you know he's actually big with electronics, so he might have something for you too. You said you like video games, right?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, remembering that I still like video games. "That's perfect. He can get you anything." "Bonus," I laughed. At one point, Gus joined us in the middle of the night, and I got to meet this kid for the first time. Even though I couldn't see him, I recognized his soft voice from the night before when I'd heard him crying on the phone. He said he was through with the place too and just wanted a ticket home. He said he'd been threatened once too many, and that all the police would do about it if he squealed is stick him under yet another roof anyways. Josh then told us all about his uncle's eccentricities and connections, and assured us that we'd be safe. He said we'd be able to do whatever we wanted once we got out, but he knew what he was doing. Gus and I agreed to go with him. We all shook on it once again. Gus slipped back to his room, and we rested up. For the first time in months we had a big day ahead of us, but sleep was still impossible. I just knew that in 24 hours I'd be free. Tears streamed down my face, my heart pounded, my mouth went dry, and the sweat in my hair soaked the pillow. I said goodbye to everything, goodbye and good riddance. My life was worth living again. I was saved from a sure fate. I had no idea where I was going to be planting my steps, and I was terrified, but it felt good. I lay back, blinked, and it was morning. What a relief. Enough with all that bullshit.